welcome to the BPD Bunch Brunch, where we get together with our favorite brunchy beverages to catch up, play games, and talk about all things BPD. I'm your host, Xannie, and today I'm here with Georgette and Katja. Where in the world are you coming from, and what's your brunchy beverage for the day?
I am coming from New Jersey in the USA, and my brunchy beverage is infused water in a giant cup.
Ooh.
I am coming from West Midlands in the United Kingdom, and I have good old water in my back cup.
Ooh.
I love it. I am coming from New Mexico in the United States, and I have got some orange juice and water. So I'm very excited for today. We asked our audience what BPD cliches or stereotypes they would like us to talk about on our show. And we were inundated with responses, so unfortunately we're not going to be able to get to all of them. But today we are going to be discussing BPD cliches and or stereotypes and sort of dissecting the level of truth or fiction that they may be. So if this or other BPD related topics interest you, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn your notifications so you do not miss anything. So Katja, of the things that our audience sent in, which one do you think is the most interesting you want to talk about first?
I guess the one that's coming up quite a lot is not able to form relationships. Obviously that's been worded slightly differently in each submission, but yeah, the general consensus, I guess, is that we are not able to hold down a relationship.
Well, it's definitely kind of true at one point, but I guess to me it depends. I'm assuming they're meaning romantic relationships, right? Like, because I hear the word relationship and I don't immediately assume that it's romantic. Like, I've had, like, my oldest friendship is 30 years, probably.
Yeah, I think that I've had a lot of relationships. I agree. Are we talking romantic relationships? Are we talking platonic relationships? I think it can have an effect on both. I assume romantic. I mean, I was married for a long time, but I don't know that it would be classified as the happiest of marriages in hindsight. But at the time, I was happy. I didn't know any better. But friendship-wise, I've known my oldest friend I've known 42 years, and we're still friends. I just talked on the phone with her. She would even say we're still friends.
That's not a one-sided clingy situation.
Yeah, I feel like my story is pretty similar to that. I mean, I've had friendships that have been enduring for many, many years without really too many ups or downs. Like, they're the same people that I've had in my life for a really long time, and romantic relationships have definitely had their challenges, but I've still got ex-partners that I'm in touch with, that I've got a good relationship with. So yeah, I think it just really kind of depends on the relationship. I feel like where a lot of relationships have failed have either been lack of communication on my part, or it's just straight up incompatibility with values, the way that we see the world. So yeah, it's quite difficult to answer. It's certainly not the case that, you know, I've single-handedly destroyed all of my friendships and relationships with my behavior. You know, if anything, it's kind of the opposite, because I don't really externalize. If anything, I probably should have got rid of quite a few relationships way before I actually did.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a lot of the cliches or stereotypes is just, they're kind of like these blanket statements, right?
Probably the statement's probably something like, there's a tiny grain of truth to it. Because if you're asking somebody who is on the receiving end of a bad friendship with a person with BPD, that's the statement they're going to make.
I've had friendships with people with BPD where, as you say, I have been on the receiving end of some quite unpleasant behaviour. So I do think that it does happen, but it's probably not true for everybody. Like, the way it went down was quite shocking. Like, I'm not really going to talk about it too much on here because that person isn't here to defend themselves, but yeah, I do believe it can happen, and it does happen.
Yeah.
Well, also, difficult moments are not the same thing as, like, not being capable of maintaining connections.
All right. Did you want me to pick, Xannie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a good one, that we all come from it's spelled weird, but I think it's supposed to be sexual trauma. There are more trauma types out there. I think that one's good because there's also an idea that BPD develops because of some sort of trauma, and we think of big traumas. So I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't experience sexual trauma until after I already had BPD, so it definitely wasn't part of the cause.
Yeah. And I don't feel like I had a very traumatic, like big T traumatic childhood or anything. I more think that it was just that I was a tulip in a rose garden. Like I just wasn't getting what I grew up in a very invalidating environment. And I think that really had a lot to do with my development of it. But I do also think that people can develop it from having big traumas, including sexual trauma.
Yeah, I think it's also important that it's not just the trauma, like it's the interaction of trauma and your temperament. And it's like if your temperament and your trauma are just linked up just so, congratulations, you have BPD.
Yeah, and if you go through a trauma that's not treated right, like the aftermath of the trauma isn't handled correctly.
Yeah, I think BPD in general is just a really maladaptive coping mechanism when things go wrong in life, like big trauma, little trauma. You know, there's so many things that could affect whether or not you get BPD. And you know, like thinking about what I've spoken about in the past, like it's not always from family either. Like mine is definitely not from my family. So trauma is such a umbrella term, and I don't think anyone really gets to define what is traumatic apart from the person who experienced that trauma.
So what was the one that I just saw one? I mean, I don't know if there's that much to say on this one, but somebody said serial killers. Thanks, Netflix. I'm not sure which one they're referring to, but I do know that, you know, Hollywood and people love to diagnose villains with mental health conditions, and then people kind of run away with their interpretations, and I can't say that serial killer has ever been on my list of things to do in life.
Yeah. I think there's probably a lot that has to go wrong there to get to that point.
I did teach in prison, going back quite a while now, but we had specialist personality disorder provision in my prison, so I did work with a lot of people with personality disorders. And what I will say from my experience, and I was in a very low security prison, so this wasn't like category A where you're going to get the big name killers. But in my particular prison, it was basically almost all antisocial or borderline personality disorder. And generally, and this is a big generalization, the people with BPD were in prison for crimes that were pretty impulsive. So things like drink driving and things that weren't really planned. It wasn't big stuff. And I'm not saying that there aren't serial killers out there with BPD, but in my experience, it's not probably as widespread as what people would think amongst the serial killer population.
I think we can just say that it seems statistically unlikely that everyone with BPD is a serial killer, given the percentage of the population that is estimated to have it. It just doesn't really seem likely. Well, I mean, I think what Katja said about the impulsivity, like, I don't think I have enough forethought to, like, do that. And also, who has time for that?
I don't feel like anyone's really got the time or the inclination to be a serial killer. Like, you have to have a lot of time on your hands. Like, in between planning lessons and marking and doing admin and data, like, I have no time to go out and kill people, even if I wanted to.
Yeah. It's the time crunch. I'm very busy.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Do you guys remember that song? Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time, ain't nobody got time, ain't nobody got time for that. All right, moving on. So Katja, what's another one?
People with BPD cannot control their anger.
Ooh.
I knew this would be a tricky one.
I feel a little called out by this. I mean, I think I am much better at controlling my anger now because I'm much more able to accept my other emotions. I'm still working on that a little bit, but like, I don't know. I didn't ever really like feeling other squishy marshmallow feelings, and so I usually just got mad. I'm a little bit of a walking BPD cliche in a lot of ways because of like the anger thing. Like I definitely struggled with anger, and I used anger largely to control other people. I think it was a way that I got people to leave me alone if I felt like they were coming too close or trying to get me to do something that I didn't want to do.
I think that there's a difference, and I've said this before on the show, that there's untreated BPD and there's treated BPD, right? So like when I wasn't treated, I had a harder time controlling my anger and my angry outbursts because I became anger. Like I was like that with all my emotions. Like I became the emotion. I didn't understand that it was something that I had any sort of control over. Once I did my DBT, my dialectic behavior therapy, and I learned all the skills there and started applying them consistently, I don't know. I think that my anger, I have the ability to control it, and that if I'm using like emotion regulation skills, my emotions aren't quite so extreme. But I still feel like I can get super, super angry, but I also don't act out on it. And I can recognize that like I'm feeling really angry right now, and I can be mindful of it and think about it, and the people around me aren't feeling and seeing the effects like they used to before I understood how to control it. So like I got really angry last week, like rage angry. I was so mad that I was thinking about like all the ways I wanted to hurt this person because I was just enraged. But I knew that it was happening. I said that to myself. I happened to be in a situation where I could go to my house. I went to my house. I went jogging, and I did, which is the tip skill. So I worked it out, and that was how I managed that situation. But like the feeling, I mean, I wasn't just angry, I was enraged, which I think is a very BPD. Like it wasn't just a little bit of anger, but nobody around me felt or saw the effect of that because I had the ability to control it. But I have been in treatment now for 4 years.
I can control it now. I was not in control of it before. But if the sentiment that people have out there is like, oh, people who have been diagnosed with BPD are never able to get a handle on their anger, I definitely don't think that's true. Like there was a time when I wasn't, and now I can. So, hooray.
Good job. What about you, Katja?
I have such a weird relationship with anger, and I feel like that comes from also having schizotypal, because I do have emotional intensity, but it is very limited to specific emotions. And because of having flat affects, you won't necessarily know what I'm feeling because you won't be able to read me well enough to know what I'm feeling, because generally I am pretty flat in expression, whether that's facial expression or just getting that emotion out there. And I do get incredibly angry, but I do feel like it gets stuck in some ways, and it's very difficult for me
constipated.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I feel like normally like anger with BPD is emotional diarrhea, but for me it's constipation. Yeah. And it's
it's a great analogy though. It works.
Yeah.
It really does. But yeah, I feel like for me, I don't really have a problem controlling anger in terms of what people see with the expression of it, but it is actually a problem for me personally, because I will sit with smouldering resentments for a very, very long time. And although I'm not driven to get revenge, I do have revenge fantasies, and I spend a lot of time on that mental imagery, which is such a waste of time if you think about it. But I am starting to look at ways that I can get that anger out in a healthy way, because it made me really avoidant and not want to confront things that made me angry. And that isn't very healthy either. So no, my anger is not uncontrollable, but yes, it absolutely is a problem. I think a lot of it ties into the fact that I don't really like confrontation. So, I mean, I have got better at it, but I think just trying to suppress it all the time has led to just general unhappiness.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's very unusual for me to get angry these days. Like, there is not a lot of things that will push my buttons anymore, because generally I am not a bothered person. But when somebody really does upset me, I just can't get it out, and it's so frustrating.
So the next one, that people with BPD are selfish. I do see a lot online, not even in mental health spaces, but like people accusing each other of selfish behavior. And a lot of the times it's like people looking out for their own needs. I'm not saying that like haven't been excessively self-focused, because I probably have had times where I focused so much on my own emotions that I was not compassionate and aware towards other people. And if that's what this person means by being selfish, okay, yes, I have been that way. But I don't think I'm like that anymore. I spend a lot of time thinking about how I come across to other people, and sometimes maybe too much, because I'm like, oh, I shouldn't say this, or I'll like record a voice note to somebody like 10 times to make sure that the wording is exactly right so that I'm not hurting their feelings. So I just don't know if this is one of those things that's really all that cut and dry.
I feel like we need more context with this. Like, what do you mean by selfish? There's a big thing of how much in our society there's a moral code or associated with like selflessness versus selfishness. Like, selflessness is held up to be this ultimate thing that you should be, and you put people's needs before your own, and you put other people before yourself, and then you end up with people who are completely burned out as caregivers and giving, and then you have people going to therapy, like learning how to prioritize themselves, so the negative connotation of selfishness is definitely there.
I think to a degree I probably was selfish when I was younger, because it wasn't until I was about 23 or 24 that I started to really work on emotional intelligence. And that was a bit of a light bulb moment for me, because I finally realized that actually not everyone thinks or feels the same way that I do. And I actually genuinely didn't realize that people were different to me, as silly as that sounds. Not everyone has the same values, not everyone has the same opinions, not everyone has the same perspective as me. And I wouldn't say it was intentionally selfish in that I wanted the focus to be on me all the time. I was just in some ways ignorant of other people's needs, because it just didn't occur to me that people were different to me. And it's been a really long process to get away from that black and white thinking and from centering myself, to work on cognitive empathy and those people skills and those emotional intelligence skills, to appreciate other people's perspectives. So yeah, I would say, not talking for everyone else, but for me, yeah, probably I was selfish.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was. Maybe there's a difference between selfishness and self-focused behavior, because I do think there's also a difference between like sort of grandiose thinking that you are sort of better, or putting yourself up as higher than other people, as compared to just not thinking about other people's feelings, which I don't think is, I'm not saying that one is better or worse than the other necessarily, but just that I do think those are things that are different, and we don't necessarily, when we use the word selfish, we're not always distinguishing between those things. And I think the reason why distinguishing between them is important is because like the way you approach it is different. Like if somebody literally thinks that they're better than you, you're going to have a different conversation with them than somebody who is just not focusing on you. So thank you everybody for sending in your cliches. Georgette, Katja, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with today?
I always think that there's a big difference between somebody who, again, is diagnosed, treated, engaging in treatment, and somebody who's not quite there yet. And I think a lot of the cliches come from a place of pain, a place of misdiagnosis, undiagnosis, and untreated.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think even if sometimes you are a walking BPD cliche, that's not to say that you always will be. There's quite a lot of evidence amongst us as people that that is not the case. So yeah, even if you are watching this episode thinking, oh my God, this is me, like, you won't always be that way if you are willing to put in the work.
Yeah. I think the hard part is that we don't really have any sort of standardized terminology for like differentiating between a person with BPD who just simply has a diagnosis and maybe is actively symptomatic versus somebody who's been diagnosed with it but is like doing some work to manage it, right? Like, I have BPD could mean I am actively engaging in symptoms, or I have BPD could mean I have been given this diagnosis, but actually you wouldn't necessarily know because I manage it really well. Like, we on the show use functional recovery, but that's not necessarily standardized throughout the world, right? So I do think that that's always an important distinction to make when you're talking about people, is you don't really know where they are in their journey. Somebody could tell you they have BPD and it could mean a bunch of different things. So I just think that that's always important to just make clear, because yeah, sometimes, before you have skills, like, sometimes it can be pretty rough. And as Katja said, you're not doomed to be like that forever. So thank you everyone so much for watching. We hope you got a nugget of fun and wisdom to take with you on your journey, and we will see you next time.